You remember the metaverse, right?
Oh, yeah.
It felt like just a little while ago, everyone was convinced we'd all be living in, you know, virtual worlds with these clunky headsets on.
Definitely felt that way for a bit.
But things have quieted down quite a bit since then. I even saw a statistic that online searches for metaverse are down like around 90% from their peak.
Wow, 90%.
Yeah, it almost feels like we dodged a digital bullet, or maybe the bubble just burst.
It's true that the initial intense excitement has definitely faded. The
Ah,
big picture visions, those interconnected virtual world, they haven't quite materialized as rapidly as, well, some anticipated.
right.
However, it's important to remember that this doesn't necessarily mean the core ideas and, the technologies behind it are disappearing. Not at all.
Exactly. And that's precisely why we're taking this deep dive today.
Yeah.
We've gathered a really interesting set of expert viewpoints articles from places like Acquit Studios and EY, academic insights from Science Direct,
Hmm.
strategic analysis from McKinsey, and even a broad look at future expectations from the Pew Research Center. So quite a
A
mix.
good range. Yeah.
Our mission for you, the learner, is to really cut through all the hype and noise and get to the heart of what's actually happening with the metaverse.
Sort of sift through it all.
Yeah, exactly. We want to pinpoint the key opportunities, understand the real challenges, and get a clearer picture of what the long term might hold. Think of this as like your fast track to being well informed without getting bogged down in complicated tech jargon.
And that's a vital point. We're well aware that our listeners, you, have varying levels of technical expertise, so we're committed to keeping our explanations clear and avoiding any overly complex terminology that might feel, overwhelming.
Okay, let's unpack this then. When we talk about the metaverse, where do we even begin? It's a term that's thrown around so much, but what fundamental concept are we actually discussing here?
Well, it's fascinating, actually, to look back at where the term originated. Metaverse first appeared in Neil Stephenson's 1992 science fiction novel, Snow Crash.
Ah, snow crash, right.
Yeah, in his story, it was portrayed as a virtual escape from a rather grim reality. Now, while that initial concept focused on a singular virtual place, our current understanding leans more towards it being an early framework for the future vision of the internet, as one of our sources puts it.
So it's not just about strapping on a headset and logging into one specific digital world then. Less specific.
Not necessarily, no. Consider how the internet itself has evolved. Web 1.0 was largely about accessing information, often called the Internet of Data.
Right, just reading stuff.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Then came Web 2.0, heavily influenced by mobile tech and social media, the Internet of Social.
Okay.
What we're seeing now is the beginning of Web 3.0, which is often described as the Internet of Place or even the Internet of Ownership.
Ownership, interesting.
Yeah, and this next phase is built upon technologies like augmented reality, virtual reality, blockchain, and cryptocurrencies to create more immersive and potentially decentralized online experiences.
Okay, so those are the foundational technologies, AR, VR, blockchain. But how do they all come together to form this metaverse idea?
Matthew Ball, he's a well-known theorist and investor in this space, offers a useful definition. He calls it a persistent and interconnected network of 3D virtual worlds that will eventually serve as the gateway to most online experiences and also underpin much of the physical world.
Okay, persistent and interconnected 3D worlds.
But what's really interesting, I think, is the subtle shift in perspective happening. Instead of solely thinking of the metaverse as a specific place, like one destination,
Right.
many experts now view it more as a collection of technologies that will fundamentally reshape the future of our digital interactions.
Ah, okay, so less a place, more a toolkit.
Kind of, yeah. Think
Yeah.
of it like the internet today, but instead of mostly flat web pages, you're navigating through interconnected 3D spaces, maybe. And these spaces can also interact with the real world through things like augmented reality glasses.
That makes a lot more sense, actually. It's less about one single destination and more about how technology is generally advancing the entire digital landscape.
Exactly.
So what does this evolving landscape actually look like in practice today? In terms of real-world adoption by businesses, are companies actually doing stuff?
Well, we are seeing a significant number of prominent brands experimenting within existing virtual environments. Places like Decentraland, Sandbox, and Roblox.
Okay, the big names.
Yeah. And initially, the primary focus appears to be on brand building and reaching new demographic groups, younger audiences often.
Give us some concrete examples. What are these brands actually doing in these spaces? Is it just advertising?
It varies. Nike, for example, established Nickland on Roblox. It's a platform for fans to connect, generate their own content, maybe design virtual sneakers, and even engage in virtual competitions.
Yeah, okay, so community building, engagement.
Right. It suggests brands are initially using these platforms for that, and indirect marketing rather than direct sales necessarily. The long-term success, of course, will depend on whether this engagement translates to tangible business value.
Makes sense. What else?
Coca-Cola introduced Coca-Cola Zero Sugar Bite, a flavor they actually marketed as being born in the metaverse.
Huh. Okay.
JP Morgan Chase even launched a virtual bank branch, complete with digital artwork and, get this, a roaming tiger.
A tiger in a bank.
Bit of fun, I suppose. Pokemon created a virtual Electricity with Selfridges for its 25th anniversary, allowing fans to buy both digital and physical merchandise.
Digital and physical. Interesting link there.
And more practically, perhaps, companies like Samsung and Hyundai have hosted virtual recruitment fairs. Siemens conducted a virtual conference, highlighting the potential for more efficient data exchange.
A virtual recruitment fair. That's a really interesting application. Definitely moving beyond just like initial marketing stunts or roaming tigers.
Absolutely. And at the Corporate Innovation Summit at Collision Conference back in 2022, this very point was a key topic of discussion.
Oh, yeah. What was the vibe?
Well, the feeling was, while there isn't a singular killer app for the metaverse that everyone is flocking to yet,
Right, no must-have thing.
exactly. But there was a general consensus that it does represent the next stage in the evolution of digital experiences. However, a major challenge identified was the difficulty in building a strong business case and demonstrating a clear return on investment for these initiatives.
Ah, the ROI question. Always comes back to that.
Always. So while these examples showcase early experimentation, the lack of a universally adopted platform and, clear revenue models remains a significant hurdle for widespread corporate investment.
So we're seeing some companies jumping in early, testing the waters, while others are taking a more cautious wait-and-see approach. Is that
Okay.
fair?
Exactly right. The pace of adoption is really quite varied across industries and even within them. But beyond these initial, sometimes flashy exploratory ventures, we are starting to see certain specific use cases gain real traction.
Like what? What's sticking?
Things like training and onboarding new employees in immersive virtual environments. It can be safer, cheaper sometimes.
Okay, I can see that.
Enhancing employee engagement through virtual social spaces like virtual water coolers and gamified incentives. Facilitating team collaboration with virtual whiteboards and shared digital workspaces.
So internal uses mainly.
A lot of that, yes. But also delivering more engaging customer experiences through augmented reality overlays. Think seeing how furniture looks in your room before you buy it.
Right, AR stuff.
And even enabling remote troubleshooting and assessment of complex industrial equipment using virtual reality. Big potential in manufacturing and engineering.
Okay, so we're seeing some practical applications start to emerge. Definitely. But that initial wave of metaverse hype was just so intense. What happened? Why the shift towards what we called tempered expectations earlier?
Well, the initial excitement was really driven by a combination of factors, wasn't it? Significant advancements in the underlying technologies, for one.
Yeah, the tech got better.
Extensive media coverage, endorsements from influencers and celebrities. Remember Facebook becoming Meta.
Can't forget that.
And even the impact of the pandemic, which pushed so many in-person interactions into the digital sphere. People were actively seeking new ways to connect and interact online when physical options were limited.
That definitely makes sense. The pandemic certainly accelerated a lot of pre-existing digital trends, didn't it?
Absolutely. But then came the perhaps inevitable period of disillusionment.
The crash after the high.
Sort of. The underlying technology wasn't quite mature enough to fully deliver on all the grand promises. There were issues with technological limitations. The various virtual spaces felt disconnected, fragmented. They weren't truly interoperable.
Right, you couldn't easily jump between them.
Exactly. And significant concerns began to surface regarding privacy and security within these novel digital environments. Big questions. We also observed venture capital firms beginning to shift their investment focus towards the next potentially transformative technology, generative AI.
Ah, so the money started looking elsewhere. Bit of shiny new toy syndrome, perhaps?
In a way, yes, but it also mirrors a pattern we've seen with other transformative technologies throughout history. Think back to the early days of the internet.
Okay.
There was tremendous promise and excitement, followed by the dot-com bubble burst, which led to widespread skepticism.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Lots of companies went bust.
But the internet didn't disappear, did it? It evolved significantly with the expansion of broadband access, improved user interfaces, and the rise of Web 2.0.
That's a really insightful parallel. So this current cooling off period in metaverse hype might just be a similar phase, a recalibration, a more realistic assessment.
Precisely. Jeffrey Cole from USC Annenberg even remarked after the dot-com bubble burst that, in spite of the bubble burst, a failure of the internet could not be farther from the truth.
Interesting.
And Greg Kahn of GK Digital Ventures points out that truly transformative technologies like artificial intelligence and natural language processing also require a considerable amount of time to mature and find their widespread utility. The metaverse is likely following a similar, longer-term trajectory.
So instead of focusing on the grand, all-encompassing virtual world vision right now, maybe the emphasis should shift, maybe towards the more immediate and practical applications of these foundational technologies.
That's exactly the suggestion from Jitu Patel at Cisco. He argues that our focus should be on how metaverse technologies, the AR, the VR, the collaboration tools can tangibly enhance existing experiences for both consumers and businesses in meaningful ways, incrementally.
Okay, so the initial frenzy cooled down as reality set in and attention shifted. Now let's delve into these specific technological and business obstacles that are currently, hindering the metaverse's progress. What are the real roadblocks?
Well, as we touched on, we are seeing some real progress in specific business areas. Things like enhancing employee experience, EX, improving customer experience, CX, and the increasing use of digital twins, those virtual representations of real-world objects or systems.
Digital twins, right?
These are moving beyond the purely experimental phase in some industries. However, generally speaking, CEOs are showing, understandably perhaps, a greater interest in those shorter-term, simpler applications.
Low-hanging fruit.
Kind of. And the direct demonstrable benefits of technologies like augmented reality, virtual reality, and blockchain, rather than committing to huge, large-scale investments in a broadly defined and still somewhat nebulous metaverse concept. It's about showing concrete value and that clear return on investment we mentioned.
Right. It really comes down to demonstrating tangible benefits and a clear path to profitability, doesn't it? Especially in the current economic climate.
Absolutely. And then there are these significant technology-related limitations we need to talk about. Privacy is a major, major concern.
We mentioned that briefly, yeah.
Particularly because metaverse technologies often involve the collection of biometric data, things like eye tracking, facial recognition, to enhance the feeling of immersion and enable greater personalization.
Which sounds cool, but...
But it raises serious potential risks of identity theft and unauthorized access to highly sensitive, very personal information. Ensuring the security of this type of data is a substantial challenge that really needs to be addressed.
It makes perfect sense. People are already quite concerned about their data privacy in the current online environment. The prospect of sharing biometric data within virtual worlds definitely introduces another layer of complexity and, frankly, potential risk was another significant hurdle.
Hardware limitations are another key bottleneck. The vision of a truly seamless and consistent experience across a wide range of devices, from smartphones and tablets to laptops and dedicated VRR headsets that's still quite far from being a reality.
Clunky, right?
It can be, yeah. We currently face challenges related to raw hardware performance, sufficient network bandwidth, adequate battery life.
Battery life, always an issue.
Definitely. Physical comfort during extended use. Nobody wants a heavy brick strapped to their face for hours. And just basic compatibility between different systems. It can often be a clunky and frustrating experience to try and switch between devices or access the same virtual content consistently.
Yeah, everything's in its own little walled garden sometimes.
Exactly. The significant fragmentation within the hardware ecosystem is a major impediment. It really highlights the critical need for the development and adoption of universal interoperability standards. That's the aim of initiatives like the Metaverse Standards Forum, trying to get everyone to play nice together.
So it sounds like until the underlying hardware technology significantly improves, gets lighter, faster, cheaper, more comfortable, and these fundamental privacy concerns are effectively addressed, widespread adoption of a truly interconnected and seamless metaverse experience will likely remain a considerable challenge.
I think that's a fair assessment of the current state, yes.
But despite these current limitations, are there any indicators pointing towards the long-term viability and potential of the metaverse? Or is it just fizzling out?
No, definitely not just fizzling out. There are positive signs. For instance, a recent study conducted by Nokia and EY revealed something quite interesting.
Oh, yeah.
They found that a significant majority, 80% of industrial metaverse early adopters, believe that these technologies will have a significant or even transformative impact on their business operations.
80%. That's high.
It is.
Yeah.
And only a very small fraction, just 2%, viewed it as a temporary fad. So, in the industrial space at least, there's strong belief. We're also seeing continuous advancements and improvements in both mixed reality and virtual reality headsets. They are getting better. And in the sophistication and usability of collaborative virtual platforms, too.
So it appears that the more immediate and substantial progress might be in specific industrial applications, rather than that widespread consumer-focused metaverse we first heard about.
That does seem to be the current trend, yes. The foundational building blocks for what's being called the industrial metaverse are already being actively implemented.
Like what specifically?
Well, augmented reality AR is being utilized to overlay critical digital information onto the physical workspace. Think of instructions appearing over machine for a mechanic.
Like hands-free guidance.
Exactly. For tasks like emergency response guides or complex maintenance procedures, virtual reality VR is providing safe and highly immersive environments for employee training, like practicing dangerous procedures without risk.
Makes sense.
Computer-aided design, CAD software, enables incredibly precise digital modeling, creating those digital twins we mentioned. And the Internet of Things, IoT, provides the capability for real-time monitoring of physical assets and processes, feeding data back into the virtual models.
So these different techs are starting to link up in factories and things like that.
Increasingly, yes, they're converging to create tangible value within various industries.
That paints a much more pragmatic picture than just, virtual avatars socializing in a purely digital realm.
Exactly. And if we consider the natural progression of online experiences, we've moved from the read-only nature of Web 1 to the interactive capabilities of Web 2.
Right.
The future, increasingly driven by sophisticated game engine technology and advancements in VRR, is highly likely to be significantly more immersive. Even traditional websites could eventually evolve into more interactive metaverse footholds, maybe interconnected through Web 3 technology.
So the web itself might become more 3D-ish over time.
Potentially, yes. And we're also observing significant activity in the market that points towards continued belief. Things like the recovery of the Fidelity Metaverse ETF, strategic acquisitions by major tech players like OpenAI buying a 3D virtualization company, Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard.
Right, the gaming angle is huge there.
Huge. It all indicates ongoing investment and a fundamental belief in the potential of these underlying immersive technologies and infrastructure. Companies are still building.
Okay, so while the initial consumer hype might have been excessive, there's clearly still a significant amount of serious development and investment happening behind the scenes, particularly in enterprise and industrial areas.
Definitely.
But what do the experts themselves predict for the longer term? What might the metaverse realistically look like by, say, the year 2040? That Pew Research study you mentioned.
Right. The Pew Research Center actually surveyed a wide array of experts on precisely this question, and interestingly, their opinions were almost evenly divided.
Really? Split down the middle.
Pretty much. Approximately 54% of those surveyed anticipate a much more refined and truly fully immersive metaverse to be a significant part of daily life for 500 million or more people globally by 2040.
500 million. Wow, that's a lot.
It is. However, a substantial 46% do not foresee this level of widespread adoption by then.
That's a pretty significant difference in opinion. What were some of the key reasons behind this split in expectations? Why such disagreement?
Well, many of the experts who anticipate a significant metaverse presence by 2040 believe that augmented reality, AR, and mixed reality technologies will become far more prevalent in everyday life than fully immersive virtual reality experiences.
So enhancing the real world rather than replacing it.
Exactly. Their view is that AR/MR will primarily function to enhance our existing reality with digital information overlays, rather than us fully escaping into entirely separate virtual worlds for hours on end.
Okay. And the skeptics.
Yeah.
The 46%.
Those who are more skeptical frequently point to the current limitations we've already discussed. The relative lack of compelling use cases beyond gaming and entertainment for a broad audience.
What's the killer app for everyone?
Yeah.
Still not clear.
Right. And the ongoing issues related to the cost, comfort, and overall user experience of current immersive technologies. The hardware problem again.
So it sounds like there's a general consensus that some form of extended reality, probably AR or MR, will likely become more integrated into our lives.
Mm-hmm. Seems likely.
But the extent to which it evolves into a fully immersive metaverse, as initially envisioned, is still very much an open question and subject to considerable debate among the experts.
Precisely. And many of the experts surveyed also raised important considerations, maybe warnings, about the potential for the metaverse, in whatever form it takes, to amplify existing online challenges.
Hmm. Like what?
Things like the potential for exploitation by large technology companies, increased levels of surveillance and data collection, surveillance capitalism on steroids, maybe, and fundamental questions surrounding data ownership and control. Who owns your virtual self?
Big ethical questions there.
Huge. There are also some more speculative predictions, both positive and negative, ranging from the possibility of virtual extraterrestrial travel experiences
Cool.
to concerns about the potential for multiple self syndrome arising from maintaining distinct virtual identities.
Multiple self syndrome. That sounds worrying. Like it could have some potentially significant psychological implications.
It certainly could. It highlights the potential psychological impacts of spending substantial amounts of time in virtual environments, embodying different identities and personas. Other concerns included the possibility of a decreased demand for physical goods as people increasingly live digital lives, and the potential emergence of a fantasy metaverse that prioritizes passive consumption over critical thinking and active engagement, just zoning out.
Hmm. So it's a real mix of potential exciting benefits, new experiences, training, collaboration, and some potentially significant risks and challenges that need to be carefully considered as this develops.
Absolutely. It's not inherently good or bad. It's about how it's designed and used.
So bringing all of this together then, what would you say are the key takeaways for you, the learner, from our deep dive today? What should people really grasp?
I think the most important thing to understand is that the metaverse is currently in a state of evolution. It's moving beyond that initial massive surge of hype.
Okay, the hype is settling.
Right. Practical and valuable applications are indeed starting to emerge, particularly within industrial and enterprise settings. We are likely to see augmented and mixed reality technologies achieve more widespread adoption in the near to medium term compared to fully immersive virtual reality for everyday, all-day use.
AR and MR first, probably.
Probably. And it's also crucial to remember that the metaverse isn't necessarily a single, unified virtual world like in the movies. It's better understood now as a diverse collection of technologies, AR, VR, AI, blockchain, 3D environments, that are enabling entirely new kinds of digital experiences.
So it's less about immediately jumping into a Ready Player One style scenario,
Much less for now, anyway.
and more about understanding how these core technologies are collectively shaping the future landscape of how we interact with the digital world around us, step by step.
Exactly. And the most strategic approach right now for businesses and individuals really is likely to be evaluating these individual technologies based on your own specific goals and recognizing that the metaverse in its current iteration is more accurately described as a powerful set of tools that can incrementally enhance and transform digital experiences. Focus on the tools, not just the grand vision.
Okay, that makes sense. Focus on the practical benefits of the underlying tech. So considering the significant potential for both these enhanced experiences and, as you mentioned, the amplification of existing online challenges,
Yeah.
here's a final thought for you, the learner, to mull over.
Mm-hmm.
Considering the trends and insights we've discussed today, what specific aspects of the evolving metaverse do you personally find most promising? Or perhaps most concerning? What worries you or excites you about the future of digital interaction and our fundamental relationship with technology?
Good question to ponder.
It's definitely a space to continue watching and exploring as these trends continue to unfold. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.